Is that all he could afford? My sister asked, her voice light, careless, loud enough for everyone in the compound to hear. Even the chairs looked tired. Someone laughed. Someone else pretended not to. I kept my eyes on the ground, on the cracked cement where rainwater always pooled, and I said nothing. That silence became my habit long before that day. I grew up in Ibadan in a family that measured worth the way people measure yam tubers in the market, by size, by shine, by who is watching. My sister, Bizi, was the first daughter. Tall, outspoken, always dressed like she was stepping into a camera frame, even when there was no camera. People listened when she spoke. Elders indulged her. Neighbors repeated her words like proverbs. I was the second daughter. The quiet one. The one people forgot to ask questions of. If Bizi was the talking drum, I was the calabash in the corner, useful but unnoticed. We shared a room growing up. At night, when the generator hum faded and mosquitoes sang, she would talk about the life she expected, marriage into money, a husband whose name opened doors, children who would never know the taste of borrowed sugar. I would listen, braiding my hair slowly, learning how to stay invisible even in my own space. When Bizi married first, it felt like confirmation of everything everyone already believed. Her wedding in Lagos was loud, glossy, stitched together with borrowed money and borrowed confidence. Her husband drove a German car and spoke English with an accent he practiced in front of mirrors. People said she had done well. My mother cried from pride. When it was my turn years later, the compound felt smaller. The chairs were plastic. The food was simple. My husband, Kunal, stood beside me in a plain cream agbada, his hands folded, his eyes calm. He smiled at people without trying to impress them. That was what offended Bizi most. Kunal is nice, she had said when I told her I was getting married. She paused on the word, like it was unfinished. What does he do again? I told her. She nodded slowly, the way people do when they are already thinking of something else. At the wedding, she leaned close to our aunt and whispered, not quietly enough, some women are brave. They marry for love. Others prefer comfort. I heard. I always heard. I just never reacted. Kunal squeezed my hand once, gently, as if to ask if I was all right. I nodded. He trusted my silence. That trust was the first gift he gave me. After the wedding, life moved forward in its small, steady way. Kunal and I rented a modest flat not far from Dugby Market. We woke early. We ate pap and akra on weekdays, rice on Sundays if money allowed. He left the house before sunrise sometimes, returning late with dust on his shoes and quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He never complained. He never explained much either. People noticed that too. Bizi noticed everything. Whenever there was a family gathering, naming ceremonies, funerals, Christmas lunches, she found a way to compare. Her house in Magodo, her new curtains, her children's school fees, her husband's connections. She never said my name when she did it, but she didn't have to. So, she would say, smiling sweetly, how is married life treating you? Still managing. Managing. The word sat between us like a challenge. I am well, I would reply. Always the same answer.
Calm.
Neutral. Kunal never joined those conversations. He stayed with the men, listening more than speaking. Some of them dismissed him quickly. A quiet man without visible wealth makes people uneasy. They don't know where to place him. That unease worked in my favor, though I didn't realize it yet. One afternoon, during a family meeting about my mother's health expenses, Bizi took control of the room the way she always did. She listed amounts she and her husband could contribute. She named figures loudly. People nodded. Then she turned to me. And you, she asked. What can you manage? The room fell quiet. Eyes shifted toward me. This was how it always went, public questions, private judgments. I looked at Kunal. He met my eyes and gave the smallest nod, barely visible. It wasn't permission. It was reassurance. We will contribute, I said. Don't worry. Bizi smiled, the kind that shows teeth but no warmth. Of course. Every little helps. Something in her tone hardened inside me that day. Not anger.
Not yet.
Just awareness. the clear understanding of how I was seen and how I was allowed to exist. After the meeting, as people were leaving, I heard her say to someone behind me, "At least she is peace. Not everyone needs ambition." Peace. As if it were a consolation prize. That night, Connell and I ate in silence. The power had gone. Candlelight softened the room, made shadows of our simple furniture. I watched him carefully, the way you watch someone you are still learning. "You didn't have to promise anything," he said finally. "We could have spoken later." "I know," I replied. "But I meant it." He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You are stronger than you think." I wanted to ask him then about his work, about the things he never said, but I didn't. Curiosity can wait. Trust cannot. Months passed. Beezy's life, which had once seemed so solid, began to show hairline cracks. Her husband traveled more. She complained more. At gatherings, her laughter became sharper, more defensive. She still mocked, but now there was urgency behind it, like someone racing against an invisible clock. One evening, she came to our flat unannounced. She looked around with poorly disguised disdain. "You're really comfortable here," she said, touching the back of our sofa as if checking its quality. "I don't know how you do it." I offered her water. She refused. "So," she continued, "Connell is always busy." "Doing what exactly?" "Working," I said. She laughed. "That's vague." "So is life," I replied gently. She stared at me, surprised. It was the first time I had ever pushed back, even lightly. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "Well," she said, standing up, "enjoy your peace." When she left, I sat down slowly. My hands were steady. Inside, something had shifted. I was no longer just enduring. I was observing. From that day, I began to notice things I had ignored before. The way Connell answered certain calls outside. The respect with which older men greeted him in public spaces where they didn't know I was his wife. The envelopes he brought home sometimes unopened that he kept locked away. I didn't ask. I watched. Silence, I had learned, makes people careless. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My mother's 60th birthday was announced. A large celebration. Extended family, neighbors, church members. Beezy volunteered to organize everything, which really meant center stage. She called me to inform me, not to ask. "Make sure Connell comes early," she said. "People will want to see him." The way she said it told me exactly what she meant. That night, as Connell adjusted his watch before bed, I said, "There will be many people watching." He smiled faintly. "They always are." For the first time, I wondered who exactly they were watching. The day of the celebration arrived bright and noisy. The compound filled with chatter, the smell of jollof rice, the clatter of plates. Beezy moved like a general, issuing instructions, collecting admiration. Her husband arrived late, distracted, already irritated. Connell and I arrived quietly. I felt the familiar weight of eyes on us, the quick assessments. Beezy spotted me immediately. She walked over, her smile sharp. "Ah, you came. Good. Don't wander off. We may need you." I nodded. As the event unfolded, speeches began. Contributions were announced. Names were called. When Connell's name was mentioned, there was a pause, a ripple of curiosity. People leaned forward. Beezy picked up the microphone, enjoying the moment. "And now," she said, "my younger sister and her husband will also show us what they can do." She looked straight at me, waiting for the smallness she expected. I met her gaze calmly. Connell stepped forward instead. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He simply reached into his pocket and handed an envelope to the man beside the microphone. The man opened it, glanced inside, then looked up, startled. There was a murmur. A shift. Something electric moved through the crowd. Beezy frowned. "What is it?" she asked, trying to laugh. The man cleared his throat. This covers the remaining expenses. And more." Silence dropped like a curtain. Beezy's smile froze. I stood beside Connell, my heart steady, my face unreadable, as the first crack finally widened into something no one could ignore, and for the first time, My sister realized that what she had mocked all along might not have been weakness at all. And she had no idea how much more there was that she didn't know. The silence didn't last long, but it changed shape. People began to whisper, not loudly, just enough to lean closer to one another. Heads turned. Some faces showed surprise, others suspicion, a few embarrassment for having already decided who Cunnel was. Beezy laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Ah," she said, waving her hand lightly. "Very good. You see? Everyone contributes in their own way." But the room had already moved past her. Attention had shifted, and Beezy felt it slipping. She hated that feeling. She always had. Cunnel stepped back to my side as if nothing unusual had happened. He didn't look around to measure reactions. He didn't wait for praise. He simply stood, calm, his hand resting lightly against my back. That touch grounded me. I felt tall without standing straighter. As the celebration continued, people began to approach us. Not directly at first. They came with polite questions, safe smiles. "You're Cunnel?" one of the elders asked, squinting slightly. "Which family did you say you're from again?" Cunnel answered respectfully. Names were exchanged. The elder nodded slowly, filing information away. Others asked about work. Cunnel responded simply, without titles or explanations. He never lied. He just didn't decorate the truth. Beezy watched all of this from across the yard. I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and restless. Her husband, who had been sitting with his phone, looked up now, curiosity finally winning. "Who is that man again?" he asked her. "My sister's husband," she replied too quickly. "And he has money like that?" She shrugged. "People borrow. People pretend." But her voice lacked conviction. Doubt had entered, and doubt is dangerous to people who build their lives on certainty. Later, as guests ate and music played, Beezy cornered me near the drinks table. "You didn't tell me," she said quietly. I poured myself some water. "You didn't ask," she scoffed. "Don't play that game. Since when does Cunnel have this kind of money?" I took a sip before answering. "Since before we met." Her eyebrows lifted. "Then why all the secrecy?" "It was never a secret," I said. "Just not an announcement." She studied my face, looking for something. Pride, triumph, guilt. I gave her nothing. Years of silence had trained me well. She muttered. "Well, enjoy the attention. It doesn't last." She walked away, but her steps were heavier than before. That night, after the guests left and the compound emptied, Cunnel and I helped clean up. Plates were stacked. Chairs were gathered. My mother hugged me longer than usual, her eyes full but thoughtful. "You chose well," she whispered. I smiled. That was enough. In the car on the way home, Cunnel drove in silence. Streetlights flickered past us like passing thoughts. Finally, he said, "Are you all right?" "Yes," I replied. Then, after a moment, "Are you?" He smiled faintly. "I always am." I turned to look at him. "You don't have to protect me from my own family." "I know," he said gently, "but I will protect our peace." That was the night I decided something quietly without drama. I would no longer shrink to make others comfortable. I wouldn't boast. I wouldn't explain. I would simply stop carrying shame that was never mine. Beezy, however, made a different decision. From that day on, her interest in my life sharpened. She called more often. She invited us out. She asked questions that sounded casual but weren't. "So, Cunnel travel sometimes?" she said during one visit. "Where to?" "Here and there," I replied. "For work?" "Yes." "What kind of work requires so much privacy?" "The kind that doesn't need an audience." She laughed, but her eyes lingered. "You've changed." "No," I said. "You're just looking harder." Her marriage, meanwhile, began to fray in ways she could no longer hide. Her husband's business deals went sour. His phone calls became tense. Arguments spilled into public spaces. She stopped bragging about his connections and started complaining about stress. One afternoon, she arrived at our flat again, this time without makeup, her hair wrapped carelessly. She sank onto the sofa and sighed loudly. You're lucky, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Why? You married peace, she replied. Some of us married noise. I said nothing. Silence, again, was the safest response. She looked around, taking in our modest space. Still simple, she observed. Yes. And you're happy? I met her eyes. Yes. That answer unsettled her more than any boast could have. Weeks later, the family gathered again, this time for a cousin's engagement. Smaller crowd. Different mood. Beezy arrived late, her smile forced. Her husband didn't come at all. People noticed. Questions circled her the way flies circle ripe fruit. She deflected, laughed too loudly, drank too quickly. By the time Cunnel and I arrived, the air was already thick with unspoken things. During the meal, an uncle raised a toast and began praising strong marriages and wise choices. It wasn't aimed at anyone, but Beezy flinched as if struck. Afterward, she pulled me aside. You think you're better than me now, she said, her voice low and shaking. No, I replied. I think we're different. That's worse, she snapped. I looked at her, then really looked. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of being seen clearly. You never told me, she said suddenly, that Cunnel was like this. Like what? She hesitated. Important. I smiled slightly. Important to who? She didn't answer. What Beezy didn't know, what she couldn't know yet, was that Cunnel's influence didn't live in flashy displays. It lived in quiet rooms, in documents signed without noise, in favors exchanged without witnesses. He worked with organizations that didn't advertise themselves. He advised people whose names appeared in newspapers, but whose decisions were made far from microphones. He had chosen a life of low visibility, deliberately. And I had chosen him knowing that. The moment everything truly shifted came unexpectedly during a community development meeting. Our area had long struggled with bad roads, irregular water supply, promises made and broken by local officials. This time, someone with real authority was attending. The hall was crowded. Plastic chairs scraped against concrete. People murmured, hopeful but skeptical. Cunnel and I sat quietly near the back. Beezy arrived dressed sharply, determined to be noticed. When the official began speaking, it was the usual language: plans, considerations, future budgets. People listened politely. Then questions opened. Beezy stood almost immediately. She spoke confidently, criticizing, suggesting, positioning herself as a concerned, capable citizen. Some people nodded. Others rolled their eyes. When she sat down, she glanced at me with a look that said, "See, this is how it's done." Then something unexpected happened. The official looked toward the back of the room. "Cunnel," he said, his tone shifting noticeably. "What do you think?" The room went still. Beezy's head snapped around. Cunnel stood slowly. He didn't look surprised. He spoke calmly, respectfully, but with clarity. He referenced previous projects, funding structures, timelines that were realistic. He didn't criticize. He offered solutions. The official nodded repeatedly. "Exactly," he said. "That's what we discussed." Discussed. Whispers erupted. People turned fully now. Recognition spread like fire. Beezy sat frozen. After the meeting, people approached Cunnel openly. Hands were shaken. Numbers exchanged. Beezy hovered at the edge, forgotten. When we got home that night, she called me. Her voice was tight. "Who is your husband?" she asked. I paused. "He is exactly who he has always been." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you need." She hung up without another word. From that point on, the balance between us was gone. Beezy could no longer mock openly. She could no longer pretend I was beneath her. But pride doesn't dissolve quietly. It mutates. She began to compete. She organized events. She volunteered loudly. She posted online about empowerment and success. She borrowed money to maintain appearances. Her husband's absence became permanent, then official. Divorce, people whispered. When the truth came out, it came quickly. Failed investments, hidden debts, promises built on air. The life she had flaunted collapsed inward.
Through it all, she avoided me.
Until the invitation arrived. A large charity gala was being organized in the city, connected to international partners.
Names that mattered would be there.
Beezy, desperate to reclaim relevance, had attached herself to the planning committee. The invitation listed Cunnell as a keynote speaker, and my name quietly beside his. The night of the event, as I dressed slowly, adjusting my simple but elegant outfit, Cunnell watched me with a thoughtful expression. "You don't have to come," he said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to." He nodded. At the venue, the atmosphere was polished, controlled. Security was tight. Guests moved with practiced confidence. When we entered, heads turned, not because of spectacle but recognition. Beezy stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, tension etched into her posture. When she saw us, her breath caught. She approached, forcing a smile. "You came." "Yes," I said. She glanced at Cunnell, then back at me. "I didn't realize. I didn't know you would be so involved." Cunnell greeted her politely. "Good evening." She nodded stiffly. As the program progressed, speakers took turns. Applause rose and fell. Finally, Cunnell's turn came. He walked to the podium without flourish. The room quieted. He spoke about development, accountability, the quiet work behind real change. He spoke without naming himself, without praising his achievements. He spoke like someone who didn't need validation. I watched from my seat, calm. At the end, applause thundered. Then the moderator smiled. "Before we conclude," he said, "we would like to acknowledge someone who has been instrumental behind the scenes. Someone who chose not to be seen." He turned toward me. "My wife." Gasps rippled softly. Beezy's clipboard slipped from her hands. I stood, my heart steady, and walked to the stage. Cunnell took my hand briefly, then stepped aside. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. My presence said enough. As I returned to my seat, I passed Beezy. Our eyes met. For the first time, she looked at me without contempt, without competition. Only realization. And it was in that moment, as the weight of years settled between us, that she understood something she had mocked for too long, that silence is not emptiness, and humility is not weakness. And she had built her life mistaking noise for power. She didn't speak to me that night. Not during the reception that followed, not while guests congratulated Cunnell, not even when we passed close enough for our sleeves to brush. Beezy stayed where she was, smiling mechanically, clapping at the right moments, her eyes unfocused, as if she were watching a story that no longer belonged to her. That was the first real punishment, not humiliation, not exposure, but irrelevance. In the weeks that followed, the family's tone toward me changed in small but unmistakable ways. Calls came directly to my phone now. Opinions were requested. Decisions were paused until I spoke. It wasn't reverence. It was adjustment. People recalibrate quickly when their assumptions collapse. Beezy noticed every shift. She started arriving earlier to gatherings, leaving later, positioning herself carefully beside influential relatives. She laughed softer now, asked more questions, apologized vaguely, without naming what she was apologizing for. "You know," she said once, stirring her tea too slowly, "we didn't always understand each other growing up." I nodded. "We still don't." She smiled tightly. "But we're sisters." "Yes," I said. "We are." She waited for more. I gave her none. Her divorce became official shortly after. No dramatic announcement. Just a quiet change in her name, a relocation to a smaller flat closer to the city. She told people it was a fresh start. People nodded politely. One afternoon, she came to see me alone.
Cunnell was away.
The house was quiet. She sat across from me, hands folded, studying the floor. "I need your help," she said finally. The words hung between us. Not because they were unexpected, but because they were rare. "With what?" I asked. She inhaled. "I've been offered a position. It's not guaranteed yet. There are people involved. People who know your husband." I waited. "They respect him," she continued carefully. "They listen to him. And," I said, "and I thought maybe you could speak to him." There it was. The thing she had never allowed herself to ask. I leaned back slightly. Have you spoken to Connell yourself? She shook her head. I wouldn't know how. I considered her for a long moment.
She looked smaller like this.
Not physically. Internally. Pride had always been her armor. Without it, she didn't know how to stand. I don't speak for my husband, I said gently. And he doesn't act on requests made through pressure. I'm not pressuring you, she said quickly. No, I replied. You're assuming. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I can't help you that way, I continued. But you can help yourself. She frowned.
How?
Be honest, I said. With him. With yourself. She laughed softly, bitter. You make it sound easy. It isn't, I said. That's why it matters. She left soon after, quieter than she had arrived. That evening, Connell called. His voice was calm, familiar. Your sister came to see me today, he said. I smiled slightly. I know. She was different, he said. Not defensive. Just tired. Did you help her? I asked. I listened, he replied. That's all anyone deserves at first. That answer told me everything I needed to know. The position she wanted didn't materialize immediately. But something else did, an opportunity smaller, less glamorous but stable. She took it reluctantly at first, then with growing focus. For the first time, she was building something without an audience. We didn't become close. Healing doesn't work that way. But we became civil. Honest. Careful. Months passed. Life settled into a new rhythm. Connell's work continued quietly. Our home remained simple. Nothing about us looked impressive from the outside, and that was exactly how we liked it. One evening, during another family gathering, someone joked lightly, "You see, quiet people are dangerous." Laughter followed. I met Beezy's eyes across the room. She didn't laugh. She nodded. Later, as we were leaving, she stopped me near the gate. I owe you something, she said.
You don't, I replied.
I mocked you, she said, her voice steady. Not because you were wrong, but because I was afraid you might be right. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I felt no weight between us. Fear makes people loud, I said. Peace makes them quiet.
She smiled then.
A real smile. Small, but sincere. As Connell and I walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, I thought about how close I had come, so many times, to shrinking myself for comfort, to confusing patience with weakness. I hadn't won by proving anything. I hadn't exposed secrets or raised my voice. I had simply stayed still long enough for the truth to arrive on its own. Connell slipped his hand into mine. Are you thinking? He asked. Yes, I said. About what? About how many people mistake noise for strength, I replied. And how expensive that mistake can be. He smiled. Then we're doing something right. The night wrapped around us gently as we walked on, leaving behind the echoes of a past that no longer had power over us and stepping into a future that required no explanation at all. The following weeks were quieter than anything that had come before, and that quiet felt earned. Not the tense silence of waiting. Not the heavy silence of swallowed words. This was a clean silence, the kind that comes after storms have already passed and the ground has decided what will grow again. Beezy kept her distance, but not in the way she used to. There was no avoidance, no sharp edges. Just space. Respectful space. She showed up when necessary, left when things were done. No performance. No commentary. It was strange, watching her learn how to exist without being the loudest person in the room. One Sunday afternoon, we all gathered again at my mother's house. Nothing formal. Just food, heat, the usual complaints about electricity and fuel prices. Children ran in and out. Someone played old high-life music softly on a radio that crackled between stations. I sat on a low stool, peeling oranges slowly. Connell was outside with the men, discussing something in quiet tones. I didn't strain to hear. I didn't need to. Beezy entered the kitchen area and paused when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she would turn back. Instead, she sat across from me. You've always been patient, she said suddenly. I looked up. No. I learned patience. She nodded, from being overlooked. Yes, I said simply. She exhaled through her nose. I thought attention meant value. If people weren't watching you, I assumed you didn't matter. I continued peeling. People watch fires. They don't watch roots. She gave a small, humorless smile. You always speak like that now. I always thought like this, I replied. I just didn't speak. That landed. I saw it in her eyes. The realization that my silence had never been emptiness. It had been containment. Outside, laughter rose briefly, then settled again. Life continuing. I don't envy you, she said after a while. But I respect you. That was more than enough. Later that evening, as people prepared to leave, my mother called me aside. Her hands were rough from years of work, but her grip was gentle. You carried yourself well, she said. Not just now. Always. I lowered my eyes. Praise still felt unfamiliar. Sometimes, she continued, I worried that you were too soft for this world. I met her gaze. I wasn't soft. I was quiet. She nodded slowly, like someone revising an old belief. On the drive home, Connell told me he had been offered another advisory role. International this time. More travel. Same discretion. Will you be all right? He asked. I always am, I said, echoing his words from long ago. He smiled. Good. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Rain came, left. Dust returned. Life moved the way it always does, forward and indifferent to personal victories. Beezy settled into her new work. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with applause. But it paid steadily, and for the first time, she spoke about effort instead of outcomes. One evening, she sent me a message. Thank you for not embarrassing me when you could have. I read it twice, then replied. I wasn't raised to win like that. She didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was just one word. Understood. That was the end of the rivalry. Not because it was resolved dramatically, but because it no longer had fuel. Envy starves when it's not fed. One afternoon, while organizing old documents at home, I found our wedding photos. Simple images. Plastic chairs. Modest smiles. Connell standing calmly beside me, as he always had. I realized then that nothing about our life had changed in substance. Only perception had shifted. And perception, I had learned, is a fragile thing. The world rewards noise quickly. It rewards patience slowly. But when patience is finally seen, it doesn't need defending. That night, as Connell and I sat on the balcony, listening to distant traffic and nearby laughter, he asked, Do you regret anything? I thought carefully. No, I said. Because I didn't rush my truth. He nodded. Neither did I. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't ask for explanation. Somewhere not far away, Beezy was likely doing the same, learning, unlearning, rebuilding without an audience. And I wondered, not bitterly but gently, how many people spend their lives mistaking volume for strength, not realizing that the quiet ones are often the ones holding the ground together. If you were watching us pass on the street, you wouldn't stop. You wouldn't stare. You wouldn't know anything had ever been at stake. And that, I understood at last, was the real victory.